Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I will be reviewing Supermassive Games' brand new The Quarry. Now they're back with their biggest development outing since Until Dawn all the way back in 2015 when life was simpler. Since then they have been slowly releasing chapters of the Dark Pictures anthology, but The Quarry marks itself as a completely standalone and perhaps spiritual successor to Until Dawn. I've mentioned Until Dawn in several of my videos in the past because I love it. I enjoy replaying it, and it has classic actors such as Rami Malek in it. As always, I'll warn you before spoilers. We'll start with a quick synopsis, then the pros and cons of the game. If you want to play the game with all the surprises, pause when I let you know, then come back when you're ready and we can see if we agree on the game's outcomes. This review has to be dedicated to my two friends who sat with me through the whole thing, making comments and notes to help me create a better review. You guys rock, and thanks for dealing with my paranoia the whole way through and me swearing profusely. So, The Quarry starts in a classic way, two teenagers driving down a road in the woods late at night. They think they've hit something and drive their car off the road, but when they go to see, there's nothing there. One of them, Laura, ends up wandering into the woods and is fairly sure she's being pursued by something she can't see that whispers in her ear. They then run into a police officer who tells them that they have to leave. In fact, they have to go to a motel for the night. The reason these two crazy kids are wandering around the woods at night is because they are actually camp counselors in Hackett's Quarry summer camp, where they will be staying with several other teenagers looking after younger children, because that makes sense in America, for the entire summer. Something strange happens, the two disappear, and the rest of the camp counselors have to finish off the summer without them. The game shoots forward to the end of summer when the kids have left, and our horny, mad, excitable, desperate to be drunk teenagers decide that they're going to stay one extra night for various reasons. Whilst there, strange things start to happen at the camp, and it's up to you how many of them survive the night. So as you can tell from this brief synopsis, this is a classic horror style, teenagers, alcohol, strange things in the woods, set up at night, etc. I love horror, but also
I hate horror.
Yeah, me too, buddy. But we're both in this together, so suck it up. So this is your classic horror movie setup, but in game form, so you get to make the choices. It's not unlike Until Dawn in that sense, but it's also got some technological and cultural updates that even include references to Instagram influencers, the most horrific thing of our current day. As we've come to expect from Supermassive Games, there are some stunning and realistic graphics. There's some beautiful setup shots of the woods, the lake, the mountains. It's actually kind of pleasant just to play this game just so that you can see these things. There's also some quirky characters from plenty of different walks of life who can help live out their summer camp dreams, like getting drunk, kissing their crushes, and of course, getting mauled by werewolves. I really enjoyed aspects of this game, but like all good things, they do have to come to an end. And I think my playthrough of this game was fairly mauled by the problems I had with it. The game is a little predictable, and ultimately what I kind of came away thinking was it's a bit unpolished. I think if they'd had longer, perhaps done some more QA stuff, maybe I would have enjoyed it more than I ended up doing. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it and it was fun playing with friends, but there was some serious issues to do with things like some of the exploration was actually pretty basic. In fact, there was little in the way of stuff to hunt out and look through. It really deviated from Until Dawn, I feel, in this way, because Until Dawn, I think, had some really great sections of exploring things like the asylum, whereas this just was a bit back to basics for me for a game that's meant to be about understanding what's happened and what the curse is. I am glad they brought back the fixed camera, but it was a bit of a mixed bag. So fixed camera has been used previously completely in Until Dawn, then they got rid of it in some of the Dark Pictures anthology, and then they brought it back. This game was a little bit more like House of Ashes in that it had a mix of fixed camera but also controllable camera. So there were sections in the woods, for example, where you could just wander around moving the camera at will, but then if you were inside a building, for example, then they would take over the camera. You couldn't move it, but they didn't actually use this to much end. There wasn't a whole lot of jump scares or interesting uses of camera, and sometimes they used it so that you could find tarot cards, which is one of the things you look for in the game, but they were often in weird places and you'd actually have to stand in a very specific place in order for the fixed camera to move so that you could see the tarot card that you were trying to collect. There were much fewer jump scares in this game compared to previous ones, and ultimately, apart from a couple, it came off as a bit meh. A lot of the horror was centered around the cutscenes, and very little of it was actually whilst you were in control, so you were probably a bit more prepared for it because it's a cutscene. That's when you'd expect jump scares to be, whereas in previous games, they've managed to get across a few scares whilst you're actually in control of the character, and that, I think, for me, was some of the more powerful horror. There are also some very confusing scenes where things don't seem to add up. Most importantly, the fact that one of the characters doesn't know what a wheelbarrow is. I can't tell if they're meant to be joking or not because the acting doesn't explain it. But anyway, that's beside the point. Now, this is where spoilers are going to start because it's kind of hard to explain these things without revealing certain aspects of them later on in the game. So I'm going to recommend, if you want to go away and play this game, I'd go now. I'd still recommend playing it even though I'm kind of complaining a lot about it. I think it's still an overall good game to play, and particularly if you're going to play it with friends. So stop now or forever hold your peace. Like I say, confusing scenes. So for example, midway through the game, Em gets chased by a werewolf. She manages to make it off as long as you beat the QTEs and a couple of choices, but then suddenly, 5 minutes later, she's saying that the werewolf scratched her, but there's no mark. But not once during that section when you were being chased was there ever a point where the werewolf got close enough or they made a clear point to say she got bit. Which doesn't happen again, all the other ones are pretty obvious. Then suddenly she's turning into a werewolf later on in the game. It kind of feels like either they didn't do it enough to get the story across to you, or it was just a bit of a lazy, let's throw another werewolf in, what the hell. There's another example, which is when two of the characters can choose to go, well, not choose, you have to go to a junkyard to find a working car. This in itself seems ridiculous because why bother? Stay inside like you were told. But they do, and it seems like it was very much tacked on because regardless of what you do, you fail, you have to go back to the main area of the game. So it just kind of feels a bit tacked on and a bit pointless, particularly as if you make one choice to do with the car very early on in the game, all they need is a single piece of the engine in order for them to be able to escape. So it's kind of like, why bother? Why not just pick up this one piece rather than having to get a whole new car? Anyway, I could go on, but that seems like whipping a dead horse, so I won't. I'm also personally, and this is something that I have talked about previously with games, but I am disappointed by the queer baiting in this game, which is a classic move that so many other games have pulled in the past. There is several scenes where you can have two male characters flirt. It's very sweet, it's very endearing, it's just fun, and then later on during a game of Truth or Dare, they can kiss, but you also have the option to kiss a female character. Now, I chose the male character because it just made more sense because they'd been flirting previously. Later on, one of these two characters then says he felt like he missed his shot, even though there's no point to that, apart from the fact they've introduced a pretty blonde girl. So it kind of feels like the assumption here is that you can choose to have this kind of queer, sweet moment, but then when an outside force is brought in the force of Laura, one of these characters is instantly head over heels with her. They have this weird, like, flirting thing going on. It's just a bit confusing. And like I say, it kind of feels like they felt like, well, we've got to throw this in, but then we're going to very quickly bring it back because we don't want to have to code an alternative timeline where these two men end up together. It's just a little bit tired for me, personally. Then we come to the hillbillies, as I continually reference them as we were playing this game. They're not technically hillbillies, but anyway. They were just one too many cliches for me. And they also weren't actually necessary to the plot, and instead were, I guess, kind of insensitive. So you have Chris Hackett, who runs the summer camp. You have Travis Hackett, who's the police officer. And then you have three members of their family, their brother, mother, and father, who live in this very stereotypical white trash kind of way. You could have literally had any family being part of this werewolf curse with a bit more nuance, and I would have been happy. But instead you have, like I say, one camp counsellor who seems pretty normal, an overworked police officer, then two gun-wielding redneck types, one of whom is of course a gentle giant who loves his guns and knives, and gets into witty rapport such as these.
You can't hide from me in my own house, fucker!
You're a fucker.
I ain't never been stabbed before. Ow, it really hurts. Dad!
And then there is the mother, dressed in skirts and dull blouses, as if they hadn't hammered home the point hard enough. She also goes from kind and wise, trying to protect the children, to mental and revenge-wielding, trying to kill the same said children in a matter of seconds. That's if you don't blow her face off in pretty much her first scene, which seems to be what the developers were going for. My other problem with this aspect of the game is they also used recognisable actors for the parts of the parents, but gave their performances no meat, if you'll pardon the poor choice of words. Lance Henriksen has had a huge career, including Bishop in Aliens, and game voicing in Mass Effect as Admiral Hackett and Carl in Detroit Become Human. Lin Shaye is perhaps most recognisable as Elise Rayner in the Insidious films, making her a bit of a horror legend. Yet as I've said, she's hardly in the game and has very little substance to work with when she is. If we're going to talk about characters being underused, then I have to talk about the fortune teller cum witch in the woods, who acts in a very similar capacity as the psychiatrist and the curator in previous Supermassive games. She's very much removed from a lot of the action, but she will talk to you about the choices you've made, etc. I said in my review of House of Ashes that I wish they had gone back to making these characters a bit more central to the game, such as the psychiatrist in Until Dawn. Unfortunately, the devs have fallen foul again with the character of Eliza, as I said, fortune teller cum witch in the woods, who says very similar things over and over again at the end of every chapter. She almost looks bored in several scenes, which kind of fits with how I felt playing through these sections. This kind of ruined her big monologue at the end when she's angry at you, because I didn't really feel like she was that interesting, so I wasn't really scared of her, because after 9 encounters with her with the exact same pattern of brief talk, explanation of tarot cards, do you want to see a possible future, and then bugger off, it just was all a bit samey and a bit weak. Finally, and I promise this is my last complaint, I was a bit disappointed in the price of this game. It cost as much as all AAA games, which makes sense due to the amount of work that clearly went into the details, but there is barely 15 hours of game time in the Quarry. I think they assumed people would replay the game, which would make it worthwhile and worth your money, but one run through kind of exhausted all the options I was interested in exploring, and I actually think it will be a long time till I'm interested in picking up the Quarry again. Ultimately, this is a game with a lot of ideas, some great acting, and a couple of really good jump scares, but it does fall flat due to its clunky script, weak choices, and lack of exploration. It feels like Supermassive have fallen into a little bit of a formula after Until Dawn, and I am really hoping that they pull out all the stops for the last in the first round of the Dark Pictures anthology, which is coming out later this year, and I will definitely be reviewing.